Hello again. I'm back with another Demigods and Monsters, the series where I talk about characters and creatures from British mythology and folklore. And today, I want to talk about giants. Giants can be found in mythologies throughout the world, and there are many different giants in Welsh folklore alone. Already, we've mentioned Ysbaddaden, father of Olwen, in the very first video in this series, The Legend of Turktroyf. And in my previous video, the one on dragons, we met a giant who stole from King Clwf. But today, I want to introduce a different giant. And for that, we need to visit the highest mountain in all of Wales, Snowdon. Snowdon is the mountain's English name, deriving from the Saxon for snow hill, so called because it's a hill with some snow on top. Never let it be said that the English are unimaginative. In Welsh, it's known as Wyvar. But why? Well, one explanation is that it comes from the words for visible place, because the peak of the mountain can be seen from far away. Never let it be said that the Welsh are any less imaginative than the English. But there is another explanation. You see, Wyvar can be translated as tomb. So who, or what, might be buried under this mountain? Let's cast our minds back to 5th century Britain, to a time just after the Roman occupation, when legendary kings and mythical beasts still walked the land. In those days, the British Isles were divided into a series of smaller kingdoms, and the kings of 2 such kingdoms, and presumably their retinues, were travelling together one bright star-filled night. The first of these kings, whose name was Ninio, turned to his travelling companion and said, "What a delightful kingdom you have! It's very quaint." Pebio, the second king, raised a sceptical eyebrow. "Quaint?" he repeated. "Well, it's just that it's a little..." Ninio searched for the word. "Small." "Small?" Pebio repeated, putting a surprising amount of venom into a single word. "That's not a bad thing," Ninio said, hastily backpedaling. "It must be so much easier to manage. You wouldn't believe the troubles I have." "Troubles caused because your kingdom is so much larger, I suppose." "Well," Ninio said, "I don't like to boast." "And just how big is your kingdom exactly?" Pebio asked. Ninio gestured upwards. "See all that sky up there? It's probably about that big," he said, not liking to boast. Pebio bridled. "My kingdom may be smaller, but I'll wager it has more in it. More people, more cows, more sheep." "And how many sheep exactly?" Ninio interrupted. Now it was Pebio's turn to point to the night sky. "See all those stars up there? About that many sheep." Ninio looked at the sky and smiled. "Seems to me, Pebio, that your sheep are grazing on my land. Doesn't that make them mine?" "Was that a threat?" Pebio asked. No, Ninio said. "It was just a joke, just a joke." "Because if it was a threat," Pebio continued, "you'd best remember my army is bigger than yours. In fact, we could probably take over your kingdom in a single night, if we felt like it." "Was that a threat?" Ninio asked. "What do you think?" Pebio replied. And from that point on, the argument only got worse. The king's voices grew louder and louder, echoing off the hills and down the valley, droning on for hours and hours until...
"Will you two keep it down? Some of us are trying to sleep."
The newcomer was at least 3 times their height, with red hair and a big bushy beard. The kings had been so caught up in their argument that they had not noticed him approach. Now that they had a chance to look around, they noticed that their retinues had seen the giant approach, and, having been unable to attract the attention of their masters, had decided to look to their own safety and run for the hills. "And who are you?" Pebio demanded of the giant.
My name is Rhitta Gawr. This is the valley where I graze my sheep, and I don't appreciate being woken up in the middle of the night by two louts who should know better.
Pebio was not used to being addressed in this way. "Don't you know who we are?" he said.
No,
Rhitta Gawr replied.
and I don't care either.
"We are kings," Pebio said. "This is my kingdom, and in my kingdom I can do as I please." Rhitta Gawr dropped to one knee to bring himself face to face with the king.
Get off my lawn.
Ninio looked ready to back down, but Pebio, who had maybe had a bit too much to drink earlier in the evening, said two words that he would shortly, albeit briefly, come to regret. "Make me," he said. So Rhitta Gawr drew his massive sword and in one swing lopped off the heads of both of the kings. Then, to prove a point, he shaved off their beards, pocketed them, and strolled back to where his sheep were waiting. Now, truth be told, Ninio and Pebio were not well liked by the other kings of Britain. However, the kings couldn't allow Rita's actions to go unpunished. After all, if everyone was allowed to go around killing kings, then it wouldn't be too long before there weren't any kings left. And so they determined to do unto Rita as he had done to Ninio and Pebio. It did not go well for them. The kings came for him, first individually, then banding together in twos and threes. Rita scoffed in the face of each challenger before depriving him of both head and beard. After a few such battles, Rita stitched the beards together to form a cloak, and with each successive battle, his cloak grew longer and longer. Realizing that they may have underestimated the giant, the kings came in greater numbers, supported by their armies. They allied with foreign powers, with foreign lords and kings and princes. But none of this mattered to Rhitta Gawr. They were all just more beards for his cloak. And so eventually there were no kings left. No kings except one. Enter Arthur. They met on the mountain peak. Rita's cloak of beard was long and heavy, and he wore it with pride. Arthur was mounted on his horse, Clanrai, with whom he had defeated the mighty Avanc. The two great warriors regarded each other in silence, sizing one another up. Rita spoke first.
I see you have a beard. I want it.
I'm rather attached to it, Arthur replied.
I need it to complete my cloak.
Your cloak was paid for with the blood of the kings of Britain.
They started it.
You can't just go around killing people you don't like, Arthur said.
Why not? Isn't that your whole deal? Look,
Rita said.
I don't have a problem with you. Give me the beard and I'll let you walk away. You can't say fairer than that.
Not happening, Arthur replied.
I'm having that beard. You can give it willingly, or I'll take it over your dead body.
No, you won't, Arthur said.
Have you seen this cloak of beards? Have you seen how many people thought they could take me? And every single one of them was wrong. What makes you so special?
And Arthur smiled and said 3 words that would go down in history. Magic sword, mate. And Arthur held aloft his mighty blade, Caladvol, which burned with an inner fire. Rhitta Gawr drew his own sword, a massive thing of cold black iron, and the two clashed, the force of their blows shaking the very mountain itself. Despite his size, the giant was surprisingly nimble, and Arthur found himself hard-pressed. Soon his body was a mess of sweat, bruises and cuts. Yet the giant remained unscathed. Arthur's shield shattered beneath the weight of Rita's sword. His armor buckled and his ribs cracked, but still he fought on. Rita forced him backwards until his back was against the stone. The giant laughed as he swung his sword towards Arthur's neck, in what was sure to be his killing blow. And Caladvol flashed. Arthur's magic blade parried the incoming strike, and the giant's sword shattered, fragments of black iron flying everywhere. Rhitta Gawr stumbled backwards, but found his progress abruptly halted. One of those sword fragments had pierced his cloak of beards, pinning it securely to the ground. Arthur stood up. Rita tugged on the cloak, but couldn't free it. Arthur climbed higher up the mountain. Rita fumbled with the cloak clasp, but his sweat-slick fingers could not find the catch. "It's over, Rita," Arthur said from his perch above the giant. "I have the high ground." And Arthur launched himself into the air, bringing the point of his sword, Caladvol, down into the crown of Rita's skull until it emerged from out of his lower jaw. The light left Rita's eyes, and he toppled like a felled tree. Quite dead. Arthur called on his men, who had apparently just been watching the fight rather than aiding their king. And together they piled rocks over the giant, cloak and all, burying him in the place where he fell. And that place became known as Gwyvar Rita, Rita's tomb. Or, more simply, Gwyvar. If you liked this story, please click the like button below. And if you want to hear more, subscribe. And if you have your own ideas for what I should talk about next, please leave them in the comments. This one was a lot of fun to research. There's a lot of variety in the Rita legends. In some he's a hero, in others a villain. Some feature King Arthur, and some don't. So I make no apologies for putting my own spin on this particular legend. I hope you found it as enjoyable to listen to as I did to write. Thank you for listening. I'll be back with more tales very soon.